All right, so this is a question I have for you because you're such a visual person and because you so love a good brand. How far into an idea is it worth creating a brand identity?
Oh, great question. Great
And
question.
I
Love
think
that.
it's different for everyone. Like for you, it would be a different point in time than for me, but how would you think about making the decision when to?
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I like the framing of that much better. So I'm a, I came from, I'm not sure if we've talked about this previously, but I did my so-called apprenticeship in media, right? So working in radio at Triple M here in Australia, really big, fast production houses where clients would walk in representing brands, who had $1 million, $2 million, $5 million every single week or every single quarter to spend. So we would often be going into rooms for 4 or 5 of these clients per day. We would get 45 minutes to come up with as many ideas. As you can see, visual thinking is kind of my thing. I always need to be around a whiteboard because I got in the habit of generating lots and lots of ideas. So you get out your first 30, 40, 50 terrible ideas with the hope of then, so that's, what we call the divergent thinking. And then it's someone's job to go say, okay, guys, that's great. Now, how do we get rid of that stuff? And that's your superpower, is that convergent thinking. Okay, how do we put some barriers, some things around that? The problem is divergent thinking is really exciting, and you can come up with lots of often interesting but half-assed ideas. Those half-assed ideas, if they're written up on a whiteboard, can be kind of forgotten or completely misunderstood by people by the end of that session. Or in the case of, someone who wasn't in the room, or, a stakeholder, or, a salesperson who's like, so what's the idea? What are we moving ahead with? So one of the things that I learned from my creative director, one of the best creatives I've ever worked for, a guy called Andrew Sidwell, is, funnily enough, his nickname was Bag. And I started talking about this idea of giving your idea a handle, like a bag. So you can basically put all the contents of your idea into this bag. So even if someone doesn't understand the brief or doesn't understand anything, you give them this handle, you give them this cool name or this cool whatever it is, and they can just walk out with it. They've got all the details right there. What I'm trying to say with that is not everyone cares as much about your idea as what you do. So a good piece of packaging, in this case, a good name, but it could be a brand, it could be, whatever it is, whatever a phrase, piece of marketing, whatever. It's shorthand. It gives them a handle. It gives them a bag to carry it around. It's like, I don't need to understand all the mechanics of that idea. I don't know how this startup is going to solve world hunger. I don't even understand why they're doing it. But if someone brings it up with me, at least I have a logo or a phrase or a great name or a domain or something that doesn't require all of this additional cognitive load for me to carry this stuff around. I've just got this nice little package, and I can say, oh, it's called Vote for the Planet. It's called Centropic Enterprise, whatever it is. It's like, ideally, you've taken away all the cognitive load by coming up with something so clever that it does what it says on the tin, which is what we call a high concept pitch. So if, one thing that you and I worked on last year was this idea, how could we, when COVID hit, how could we build a brand really quickly to try and help speed up mental health delivery, telehealth. And so within 24 hours, we just had this brainstorm, this really great fun time coming up with ideas, and we came up with the idea of Feel Forward. And that still gives me goosebumps. That is just such a great name.
Oh, we've got to use it sometime.
We've got to use it at some point, right?
Yeah.
But we've got this great brand, we've got this great domain. It descended as this nice, fully formed idea. That doesn't always happen, but it's so good that you almost want to build an idea behind it.
Yeah.
build a brand business behind it, because it does so much of the work on its own.
Yeah.
Whereas most people build a business with their own name, or their like the name of their suburb, John's window washing Gold Coast or whatever it is, and then struggle to market that.
Oh man,
I
there's
can't imagine why.
yeah, there are so many avenues we can go down here.
Yes.
But here's one I'll go with. And you're kind of alluding to it. Do you like sometimes you have all of the brainstorm and then you create the bag to hold the brainstorm, right? And other times I feel like you do this and a lot of people do this. Sometimes the bag presents itself and then you find stuff to shove in. And I think it can go badly or well either way. But do you ever just make a bag for the sake of making a bag?
Absolutely. Some of my longest, most arduous work experiments, career failures, have been because I just came up with a bag. I think the first time we spoke, so last week, we talked about why not to start a t-shirt company. Like that came about because I came up with a cool brand, and then 9 years later was trying to get rid of this t-shirt company. It was like, that's a cool thing. And I took it to my parents and they're like, oh, you should put that on a t-shirt. Then it would actually mean something.
Right.
So, through a combination of coming up with a cool bag, a cool brand, and desperately wanting to, show up and have something tangible in the world to show for all the thinking, I ended up being running a t-shirt company. Total waste of, 9 years of my life. But, well, no, I learned a lot. It was great. But all the time, like I will literally, and I'm sure, most creatives are the same, like you think in words, I think in pictures, but like I will often be just looking at a nice landscape, and in my head, I'm actually sketching it out. I'm like, oh, wow, there's some beautiful symmetry here. That plus that word or something would make a nice logo. The problem is, as we spoke about last time, not falling in love with that idea because there is no idea. There's nothing to it. Like it's just an image. So that's why we have, the classic bottom drawer. You've just got to, when you're a creative, when your career is coming up with ideas, you've got to have, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, have a place to take that out of your head. It's not a bad idea. It's a good idea, but if it's not attached to anything, put it in the bottom drawer and save it for later.
Yeah, I love it. Far out. So many ways I want to take this. Okay, let's start with this one. When you're trying to figure out what an idea is, like for yourself, when you're trying to clarify it in your head, does working on it visually help you give form to the other stuff, like the business model and who it's for and that kind of stuff?
100%.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Can you tell me about
There's
that? 'Cause,
no.
yeah, being a words person, I don't work like that, so I have no concept of how that might evolve.
It's probably one of the most frustrating. I can understand why it would be so frustrating for you, when we're working on a project together, but for anyone really, because usually the first thing I'll say if a client says, oh, can we hang out? I'd like to borrow your brain for the day, or, which is, it's such an honor to be in that space and help them turn their idea into something, give it full form or whatever. And the first question I'll ask is, okay, do you have a whiteboard? If not, I'm very lucky now that, iPads have come so far that this thing is essentially a whiteboard. It's a, journal, all that stuff. But if I'm not drawing, I get stuck on the harsh edges of an idea. Because often I won't have language for something yet. It's so ambiguous. It's so amorphous and nascent in its sort of existence. Like what we're doing really in a cognitive sense is reaching into my experience, my limited experience as, in sort of pop psychology. And I'm reaching into another area, trying to connect that with whatever their industry is with, maybe it's ocean or blue tech. And I'm like, okay, well, what if we did this plus that and a little bit of this? And often the only way that I can hold all of those bits of information in my head simultaneously is to draw it.
Right.
Because we all know that the human brain can only handle like 7 or 9 digits at once, right?
It's like 3 to
But
5, man.
right, okay, yeah, maybe it's less for me. I'm sure it is. But like connecting those dots and doing that uses up so much brain cognitive, load, that often the only way that I can let my brain go while still maintaining a little element of that thought is to draw it. And that can often sort of like move off in other directions. Whereas if I try and hold it in a word or hold it in memory, I got no chance.
Yeah. No, I will reflect back that like I still can't hold stuff in memory. I just structure it in words, and it has to, like, someone comes to you and they want to work out an idea, you get a whiteboard, I start a plan, you know what I mean? Like, I'll hold it in sequence or in hierarchy or in list. But that's where we're different. All right, last question, I suppose, is back to what we were saying about when to make a brand. I think when you have so much of an idea that it needs a container, that's a good time for a bag. Or when you have an idea for a really great bag, but you don't have an idea yet, that's a great time to make a brand. What do you suggest to people who have an idea, they've done a bunch of thinking about it, they're starting to make it real? What do you suggest to them about making it into a brand?
That's tough because everyone comes at that process differently, and very much with the skills they've got, or the knowledge and comprehension.
That makes
got,
sense.
right?
Like, if it's an "it depends" question, then
Sorry, I hate those answers.
No,
yeah.
no, I might give you a reframe that'll be useful. You and I
Sure.
have been working on this side. Well, I've been working on this idea. You've been working on this idea with me for Counterparts, right?
Yeah.
It's currently a name, but like,
Yep.
let's say, at what point do you think it?
Right?
Yeah. It's a name. It's a business model. It's a vision.
With...
Yeah, but at what point would I, as a words person, at what point should I start thinking, oh, I should probably figure out what this looks like as a visual identity?
Right. Okay. I think here it's a really good opportunity again to come back to the idea of the bag, right? So, or a satchel, or just a handle. Like a name. A name is a handle, right?
Right.
So, if you've got a good name that does a lot of the work, most of the time you actually don't need a really good visual identity,
right,
because a good name does most of the heavy lifting cognitively. And if it's a name that's good enough, a visual identity that's like really flowery or really fancy will actually remove from that. You want the name to just be the logo, more than likely. Like that's it. The only reason that we'll often sort of make a visual identity with additional elements like an icon or a logo or whatever, is if it needs to show up in different I mean, most brands do need to show up in different ways. Like not everyone's lucky enough to build a brand that people want to get tattooed on themselves, but like which is usually, as a logo designer, that's like, oh man, if I've designed something so good like Harley or whatever, if someone wants to get a tattoo, that's a big deal. But I think a name should do, in most instances, most of the heavy lifting. And that's why I love, Counterparts as an idea so much, is you're a wordsmith who takes pride in the design and construction and thought that's gone into you're very precise about the words that you use. You're very good at getting rid of words that you don't, that aren't necessary, that are superfluous to the sentence or to whatever. And Counterparts is this great. I don't feel like we need a logo for that thing yet, because it's like,
it's a good enough handle.
Right. It's just a good enough handle,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if I suddenly said to you, hey man, can you do me up a logo? You'd be like, you're hiding from some task because that's not important right now.
Oh, only because I know you very well. But otherwise, I would say, sure, no worries. Here's my, let's design something.
Fair enough. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for chatting about this. Any final thoughts you want to leave the people with?
No, except I just found this old t-shirt from River City Labs and I thought it was totally appropriate for these conversations. Execution is everything. Even though what I love about these chats is we are not executing on anything yet. It's just like, this is a fun chat. So,
But we did wear matching shirts. So, I mean, we win. All right.
awesome.
I'll see you next week.
See you guys.